Good evening and welcome to Customer Value and Beyond. I'm really happy to have you with us again, and of course the fabulous Jim with me. And
Fabulous.
today we're doing a little bit different things because Jim and I decided that once in a while we would also do an episode where it's just us two, and other than us just having a chat once in a while and having a call. We will do this live for every one of you to benefit from our grand conversation. So, hello, Jim. How are things?
Yeah, that's a fancy way of saying we're too lazy to get another guest, so you're stuck with us. Things are good, Stephen. I got a raise recently, which I'm really excited about. So
Good for you. Excited to hear how's that happening in
yeah,
your world right now?
so I was making $0 a week, and now I'm making more than $0 a week. So that's
Congratulations.
good
Good for
news.
you.
So it's taken me when did I get laid off? Back in November of 2024. Seems like so long ago. But so you file for unemployment. I don't know how like the unemployment works in Germany, but like you file for unemployment, you fill out some stuff, and then they determine if you're eligible, and then they start sending you checks. Well, that never happened. It just got stuck, and it calling unemployment is not a fun thing. Like you either get put on hold, or they just say, hey, we're too busy, you got to call back another time. So like my unemployment benefits were stuck, nothing was happening, and I finally got to a woman who said, ooh, this is gonna be painful for you. So they found out there was fraud in my account, so I had to start the process all over again after 3 months of like nothing happening. So then I started the process over again, and then it got stuck again. So I literally wrote a letter to my congresswoman. Like I was out of ideas, so I wrote her a letter. Not like I didn't pen it; it wasn't like a feathered ink pen, you know what I mean? And I had a wax
Letter to
seal.
Congresswoman.
Yeah, yeah. I sent a horse and wagon for her. So I sent an email, and within a day, a woman from our office responded, and I told her what was going on, and literally the next day, stuff started moving forward. And this woman, so we talk about value and how do you convey value. I mean, a lot of times it's just doing what you say you're going to do, and it's not only following up and following through. And that's what this woman did. And she would get in touch with me every day, like, all right, I reached out, and here's what's going on. They're going to do this, expect it in this amount of time. And sure enough, everything she said that she was going to do, she did, and everything she said was going to happen as a result of her actions actually happened. So this woman is a
So you
saint.
mean she had one job and she did it?
He did it, and I figured I was gonna, you hear all the stuff that's going on with government waste and all that stuff.
I have not
Um,
heard anything about that. Is
no,
something happening on that side of things? Oh,
it didn't make it over the Atlantic all the way to
oh,
Germany.
no, we don't do news anymore over here.
I'll send a carrier pigeon to inform you of the latest and greatest. Yeah, so this woman's awesome, and things have moved forward, and I started receiving my unemployment benefits, which is good. So that's what's going on in my world. How about you?
Amazing. Well, congratulations first, right? A raise is always exciting. So good for you. And I just want to, in the end, I want to see, because we're also talking about metrics, right? And how to measure it. Just compare how long it took to get a response for your first application, and compare it to how long it took for the office of the congresswoman to respond, right? So let's see how that turns out, right? So let's see who's quicker.
Oh, it's incomparable.
Oh, you
It's
already got the result, right? It
yeah, I
was
already got
quicker.
the result. Yeah. And you know what? Like I would say this is the third time I've done this recently. Like I had two other incidents. So one was with this is super exciting for everyone. But in terms of maybe how you escalate and how you get results, I don't, use this very often, but I put solar panels on my roof years ago, and we get a lot of snow. I'm in the Northeast. We get a lot of snow in the Boston area. And once the snow, it was like a heavy snowstorm, it would sit on the panels. And once it started melting, there was an avalanche of like snow and ice that would come down. You would hear literally a crash outside of the window. And I'm like, oh crap. Like number one, this isn't safe, right? Somebody's gonna be delivering the mail, and there's gonna be an avalanche that comes crashing down on them. So and number two, like I'm gonna get sued for this, right? So somebody's getting hurt. So I wrote the people who put up the solar panels. I'm like, hey, listen, like this is a problem. And they said, you're going to have to go. That's aftermarket. You're going to have to pay for it. So I kept escalating. I found the CEO of the solar panel company, and I emailed him. Within a day, I had somebody on my case. They had booked an appointment for somebody to put on these things that catch the snow so it doesn't come tumbling down. And I didn't have to pay a dime for it. And it was awesome. And I did that recently with my what is it called? The FSA, you know what the FSA is? So I had put money into this spending account, and it's pre-tax money. You can use it for like medical expenses or anything
Mhm.
that is, tangential to that. So I had like 3,000, I had $2,500 once I got laid off. And that's always a fun process, once you get laid off, like reaching out to the old company, they're super supportive of you moving forward. But I was going back and forth in between, and I had $2,500 I had to spend in like 2 months, or else it was going to go to waste. And I just had the hell of a time just trying to figure out how I get access to these benefits because my card has been canceled. I got nothing. Like I would call them up, and literally it would just ring and ring and ring. I get put on hold. I'd wait for hours and nothing. I emailed the CEO. I emailed her. Within like a day, she put somebody on my case, and it probably took a couple of weeks, but it was months before that where I didn't get any results. So I guess the message in this is you want to provide value, just do what you say you're going to do, and that's it. You don't have to go above and beyond. Follow up and follow through. And as far as escalating, don't be afraid to go to the top to get stuff done, because sometimes it takes that in order to move the needle.
Absolutely, but I think I have a suspicion why your application also maybe took a while. And let me know if I'm wrong, but maybe they were just scared because I don't know if it's something with the green screen or something. Because for me, you turned into the Hulk every once in a while
Oh,
over the last
really?
few minutes. So maybe they just thought, oh my God, he's turning into the Hulk. So whenever you ask me questions, he shouldn't become mad, right? So let's keep things civil and let's just keep it down.
I used to when I would get frustrated with these things in my younger years, I would go 0 to 60 pretty fast, and I realized that you get more bees with honey, and I'm a lot more empathetic to the people that are on the other end of that line, because like they're trying to do their job and they don't know you from Adam. So yeah, I tend to put on my nice voice and my nice face when I call those folks, and try to put myself in their shoes, because they're dealing with people like me all day who are probably pissed off.
It's surprising because I think since we've met, which is, I don't know, it's probably a decade soon, I think I've never seen you not cool, right? So I think whenever, well, of course, there were like very exciting customer situations we also had in the past, right? And I think at the beginning in our when we opened up the US office, you were managing so many things, right? So there were probably situations which didn't go according to plan, but I think I never seen you not appear calm. I don't think
Yeah,
so.
because I push everything down, and it's a volcano. I've gotten better at this. I've gotten better
I
at.
missed the volcano piece. Okay.
Oh, there's been times, yeah. So I push things down. So but when things erupt,
Yeah.
I try to be alone when things erupt and not in front of people, whether it's my
Yeah.
kids, my wife, or what have you. And I've gotten a lot better at this. I have. But yeah, I've gotten better at dealing with situations head on, so that they don't just pile up, pile up, pile up, and then the volcano explodes. And everybody's like, "What happened, Jim? You were so cool, calm, and collected. Like, what happened?" Well, I've been pushing stuff down, and it finally came out and erupted. There's been times where I've gone and I've smashed things. My nothing, not people or not anybody else's property, but either just like broke something of my own.
A
What I
straw.
find is Yeah. But what I find is I got a slam ball, like a 50-pound slam ball, so I can go and just
Nice.
smash that against the ground over and over again.
Yeah.
So get a good workout and work out some of those frustrations.
Which helps, right? Also for me, it was always running, right? Just go for a run and don't listen
Yeah.
to music, just like myself in the nature and punishing my body for whatever, right? And just running fast and just kind of noticing, right, how you're basically draining yourself, right? I think that was for me always like a nice way of, yeah, just cooling down. Nowadays, I don't need it that much anymore, but in the past, it was surely more often. Yeah. And
Well,
my son, for example, just a funny example, my son, when he
yeah.
was small, 3, 4 years old, went to like a children's doc, and because he was sometimes a bit tense, and they said, "Do you have like a soft sofa seat at home or something like that? And do you have like a foam sword or a baseball bat or something like that? Try it out. Whenever he's like mad or seems tense,
Hit him,
just tell
whack him
him
with it.
to hit it. Whack the sofa." And
Oh,
I
you're
think
not
we
hitting
did
your
it then
kid?
for
The kid.
maybe no. Maybe did like for just a few days, and that was it. He just sometimes needed that to vent, right? And let it out somewhere. And it
Yeah.
took a few weeks, and then it was basically gone. But that just for that period, you just needed to have like that vent, and that worked out perfectly. So yeah, I'm
Well,
not
you ever see
questioning.
those? What are they called? Break rooms or smash rooms?
Oh yes,
You know what I'm talking about? Literally, you go in a room with a baseball bat and everything in there you can just smash.
yeah.
Man,
I can tell you something even more fun. I'm not sure where I got this. I got a link a while ago to an event company where they will pick you up with an AMG car, right? Drive you to an area where you can drive one of those sports cars around a racetrack. And
mm,
it's a like 3 or 4 day thing, costs a horrendous amount of money. On the
mhm.
second day, you will drive a tank. On the third day, you will go into such a room and smack things. And on the fourth day, I think it's just party time or something like that. It was, I don't know, it was a I don't know, five-figure sum that they charge for that, right? And it was all
Yeah.
just about blowing off steam, and it seems to be like a VIP thingy. Yeah, I
Do you
have
get
to look it
to
up.
crush things
Never
with the
seen it again.
tank? Do you get to drive over cars with the tank?
Yes. Yeah, they give you a
Oh,
car, you
that's
drive
awesome.
over it. I think you can smash it first, then drive over it, and something like that. So yeah, these things
That'd be
exist.
great if you could shoot the tank too.
Absolutely. But by the way, fun fact. I had a few conversations over the last weeks, and um, it was quite funny, and I wanted to save that for today, where I was approached and asked about customer success management and
Mm,
where things are going, where things have been, how things have been at other companies I worked with, right? And it was quite funny because it turned into a conversation about identification, right? So what we identify with, who we are, what we do. And it was so funny because people basically during the conversation said, okay, because you're kind of like Mr. Customer Success, right? You started this in Germany in like 2014, 15, and the meetups and customer success at Signavio and all the companies since then. And it was quite fun because the conversation was, of course, nice, and I love working like with these meetups and communities and building that up. I still love that stuff, but it got me thinking and got me to the point where I said, it's so funny. I don't see myself as someone in customer success at all. If I look at myself, I'm a nerdy process guy because bad process just drives me nuts. And my background is process management. This is how I found Signavio in the past, right? I studied business information systems, focused on process. So it was always process, workflow, understanding process metrics and all that stuff. And customer success for me was basically just like this way of delivering that, right? Delivering to the customer. So for example, during army times back in the day, when somebody said, okay, what are you doing? What's your profession? And somebody said, I don't know, airborne. Then like more mature older soldiers will say, well, buddy, that's how you get there, right? But what are you doing there, right? Because they drop you from a plane, or they drive you with a boat, or they drive you with a car, or you're flying yourself, right? That's Verbringung, nice German word. So how they get you there, right?
oh, that sounds
But then you
lovely.
have a job, right? Then you have a job, what you're actually doing. And for me, I think customer success was always just this, how we deliver the value, right? And I think that got me thinking into, and I'm curious about your opinion, because for me that explains so much why oftentimes I think different approaches to customer success management in different companies are very little comparable, because they're just from a complexity standpoint and from the way you're doing it, it's just such a big difference. And I think that got me to the point where I think, okay, I'm just thinking more in process and in a very nerdy way about how to improve that and make the customer's process better and the company's process, and that turns out to be customer success management in a way, right? Am I going crazy, or can you understand that?
Well, no, I just process in general, right? And this is where I started, I don't know, like getting into process or however you say it, but I started to see the value of it because I loved building workflows. Like when I worked for the Federal Bank of Boston, I was in operations. It was like break fix stuff, and I didn't like it, man. I quit within 6 months, and then I ended up staying there for almost 6 years. But I remember after 6 months, I was like, I walked into my manager's office and I said, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm leaving." He's like, "What do you mean?" Like, this isn't working out for me." He goes, "All right, where are you going?" I'm like, "Home." He's like, "No, like what? You're going to another job, right?" I'm like, "No, I don't have a job. I'm just getting out of here. I just want to go home. I can't take it." Then we started talking, and he started asking me, "Well, what do you like to do? What have you?" And we had all these antiquated processes. And anytime I asked I came in the new guy, I'm like, "Well, why do you do it that way? Like what?" And I started asking questions. And I started getting a lot of, "Well, that's the way we always did it." I was like, "Well, the way you always did it kind of sucks. Can we do it differently? Can we do it better?" And then I started getting into like building workflows, and a lot through SharePoint and Nintex. I don't know if you've ever heard that. And I'm like, "Oh, you can kind of connect these things, and you can have a more structured approach at doing these things and automating it." And then that led me to Signavio, and it led me to meeting you, and as a business process management company, and that's what we did, and we would train people on that, and that was cool, and we had a workflow product. But I found that just in across business, I think there's a lack of just the fundamental understanding of the anatomy of a process. So, how does it operate? How does it, how does it work, and who does it impact? And it can be applied across any role, any part of the business. It's essential to anything if you want some predictability. And especially in customer success, I don't see a lot of it. I see this just like hey, we have to grit our way through this. We have to be scrappy in what we do. Like, all right, that's great. Like those aren't strategies. Those don't create something that's repeatable and actually is going to produce some kind of predictable results. Yeah, we can be gritty and we can be scrappy as part of what we do, but fundamentally we have to define what we do. And I always go back to like process proven principles in order to do that. Okay, what is the value we bring our customers? All right, let's create a value chain. What are the processes that are encompassed in those value chains? Because those are the outcomes we want to achieve. How do we actually go about, produce or working through or getting to that end through a process, right? What are all the activities involved? Who performs them? Is it a person? Is it a system? Is it a robot? What have you? Like all that stuff. It seems like people always go like, "Ooh, process, it's too rigid," and what have you. No, it doesn't have to be. It's only rigid if you make it rigid. But ultimately, you have to have something that you can repeatedly do to have predictable results. And I always go back to process for that.
And I think it's also often misunderstood, right? Especially what you just said about being too rigid and misunderstanding, right? Because especially in smaller companies, right? Especially a lot of startups, for example, they also kind of were quite cautious to not over document their processes, right? And not to jump into that topic right away, where we in the past found out that especially the startups and early stage companies which started to somehow document processes, right, to make sure that they can share the knowledge and let people know how things work, those were the ones that actually had the advantage, right? Not over document, right? So not, you can always go overboard with process, right? Too many attributes, too much complexity, too over engineered, but to have some kind of documentation. And I think that's proven by how many like mid-sized companies you sometimes come across, where actually that bites you at some point, where you just realize how much of the documentation is missing, and where you then just at some point have to start document what's already happening, right? And then find the time to kind of put that somewhere and document that. And oftentimes that happens when you just buy some piece of software, right? And then realize that you first might need to understand the process behind it. So yeah, I think process is just such a broad topic, which just helps you understand so many things, because it teaches you swim lanes, right? So cross team collaboration, right? So interoperability. It teaches you there should be an input, there should be an output, right? So if you do something, that should be in there. There's certain responsibilities, right? You don't even need to use RACI for that, right? So responsible, accountable, RACI,
Consulted and informed,
and
Stephen.
informed. Exactly.
I gave
It's
you
been a
enough
while.
time. I had to jump in there. But it's
Thank
the
you.
hidden cost of
Yeah.
doing business, because when you look at doing that in totality, it seems so daunting. But what's not measured is all of the hustling around, all of the confusion, all of the going back and forth, all of that wasted time and effort. Right? If you think about putting in that time and effort on the front end and defining all those things, I guarantee you're going to save time,
Yeah.
money, and energy on the back end. It's the hidden cost because nobody's quantifying it. But everybody would be the first to complain and be like, oh, well, the process here is not working, or I'm going back and forth and all this stuff, and I have to go to 7 different systems to get my information. It's all process stuff, man. You know what I mean? So, don't do it, don't define it, don't invest in it at your own peril, because you're going to be running around frustrated, and people are going to leave, and customers are going to churn if you don't do it.
And I think that's a strong piece also of where I would say I've seen people in that space be successful or not that successful, if you have that piece of understanding, right? Because usually when you start customer success, whatever you specifically mean by that, you usually don't have a lot to work with, right? You usually have customers that need something. Usually there's a lot of firefighting going on. There's some onboarding that should be done. There's some kind of services maybe around it, all these kind of things, right? So that's why I'm always confused when I just hear customer success, right? Because for me, it's just so much, from onboarding to all that onto account management. And usually you need to first understand so many of these processes well, right? And how they operate, and who's involved, and who's doing what for the customer at what point. And I continuously see companies and people in that function just realize during these activities how much of that process piece is really important for that. And it's just basic, it's such a basic knowledge, but I think you can't repeat it often enough, how much you need to focus on process and document it somehow. So yeah, keep on spinning around that, but it's super important. Yeah. So how do you feel about it? What do you identify with? So I would say a process nerdy customer guy, right? Whatever that means. What would you identify with?
What do I? You're asking me
Who
how
are
I
you, Jim?
identify?
Who are you?
I, I go back to, so I don't know. I love making things work together,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this idea that something just isn't working, I love taking a step back and figuring out, all right, so let's create a problem statement, right? Simple. There's different ways, different templates, right? Methodology, what have you. But ultimately, there's some kind of problem that impacts people. It impacts, the business that the people are in. So what is that thing? What is that problem statement? And ultimately, the thing I always go back to is, all right, well, let's start with a process, not like integrating stuff. Let's not start automating stuff. Let's figure out what are the outcomes we want to achieve. And then we can start figuring out a means or methods in order to get there. And once we have that, then we can figure out what tools we have in place in order to automate things. And not everything has to be automated, and not everything is built to scale, but all of these little kind of process or automation wins, as small as they may seem, like those things add up, right? One here, one there. So it's not so much about, hey, I created this great automated process and it saved us millions of dollars. Like that's great if you can do that, but it's more of the sum of the parts. And that's why when I think folks sort of get overwhelmed by process and process driven approaches and methodologies, they're looking at everything in its totality. Like, I got to fix everything. Well, no, like that's crazy. You wouldn't do that. Take one piece of it or take something smaller and start there and then fix that. Right? Take a process driven approach. If you can automate it, great. Then, all right, move on to the next thing. And if you just do this continuously, you'll look back 1, 2, 3, 5 years later, you'll be like, oh my goodness, look at all the things that we were able to define a good process. Look at the things we were able to automate, and look at all these small efficiency gains we've had, right? Those things add up. So I think I got a little bit off track. I mean, that's who I am at my core. That's what I like doing. And I find that that skill set can be applied to any role. Like I'm in customer success. I like it. I tend to really like those folks that are there. It seems like they have the most problems to fix. So maybe that's why I gravitate towards it. So, I mean, that's what I love doing. And I love helping those folks out and ultimately helping them get results. And, by proxy, our customers getting results.
Love it. And I think this is also why there's this certain drive to solve, I would call it, right? Almost sounds like a process. Drive to solve around people in that industry. And I think this is also what drove me to this customer value and customer value framework topic that I'm working with a lot today, right? Because I think this was, at least from my development, I think just a logical evolution where we got to, because when you think back how we worked with also process management customers, right? It was a lot of complexity, a lot of understanding what they're trying to drive, which processes to improve, what they were trying to do, right? So we looked a lot into value frameworks, into maturity models, right? Don't know if you remember that maturity model we have, where we basically try to get first customers from level 1 to, I think, level 5, right? With the different process maturity levels, which also was kind of like a value model in itself a bit. And this is where over the last years I spent a lot of time with, which really showed me that this was one thing which would helped so many companies already quite a few years ago, right? In understanding that better, because we were focused so much on the product side of things, right? How the product can solve this, and then fixing some things in between, which the product might not do yet. But we talked a lot about it, but I think in reality, not many did it, actually being prescriptive and really starting to think for the customer before they do it, right? And really say, okay, those are the steps you have to take in the future to be successful in what you're doing. And I think still too few companies are actually doing that. And I have a friend who works in a larger company and is responsible for basically choosing quite a bit of software for that company, and also understanding the value behind it. And he always tells me that it's so frustrating that from the smallest startups to the largest enterprises, the companies are pitching software to them. And whenever he asks, okay, what's the actual value, right? What are you driving? How can I advertise you internally and say, okay, this is what they're driving for us? How many of those large vendors are still struggling to answer that, right? And even some of these ROI calculators you have on your websites, which aren't super helpful with that. So I think there's a huge field and a huge area of how we can do this better. And this is not just customer success. It's in marketing, it's in pre-sales, it's in sales, and then at some point also in customer success, to really just say, okay, we need a value journey, right? So what is actually this review meeting we're doing for? Why am I doing an EBR, QBR, whatever you want to call it, if I don't have anything to measure it on, right? So it's like standing at the finish line for a run, but you have no idea how many meters or feet it was or what the time should be, right? You're just standing there and said, this is the goal, but I can't really tell you if it was good or not. But I'm standing here. Welcome, you arrived, right? So it just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Does anybody even believe, you mentioned the ROI calculators, does anybody actually believe the numbers that those things spit out?
I hope
Look,
not.
I don't, I firmly believe that value doesn't have to be measured in this kind of grandiose fashion. You know, you talk about ROI calculators and what they promise to deliver. You just need to show consistent
Impact.
results, right?
Yeah.
Consistent results. And ultimately, you should know, or the company should know, the results that your products and services can produce and have that clearly outlined. So you talk about, that's what I like, value frameworks. Not just the framework where it clearly maps that out and there's a correlation between like a business outcome and an actual metric that will speak to it, but also oh, I lost my train of thought, but also being able to like actually like show them in the tool and be prescriptive about doing that. You mentioned that, it's fine with asking your customers what their goals are. I'm not saying don't do that, and I would ask it in that way, right? There's ways to nuance that and coax that information out. We should be in tune with what our customers are interested in accomplishing and what they're motivated by. Absolutely, that's part of the story, but we need to do a better job. And this is where I always found it tough, because some systems don't do a great job of telling that story and having the data to support that argument. But we ultimately should be telling our customers what they can achieve and how they can achieve it and how they need to change some of the behaviors in order to get there. And that's what I think customer success ultimately is customers choose you for a reason, right? They're usually changing vendors. So with changing vendors, usually typically takes some kind of change in your approach. If you're doing it the same way you were doing it with the last vendor, well, was it just strictly the vendor, or what, or was it how you were doing it? And plus, with a new vendor, right, you might have to change the way that you actually behave, or you might have to change your processes to fit into that. And customer success, let's say managers or customer success organizations, should be pushing customers in that direction so they can get those results with those change behaviors with their products or services. And they should be able to clearly articulate that, hopefully in some kind of tangible fashion.
Absolutely. And I think what you said, these measurable results, they are so important, right? And also just keeping it simple, right? Because I think it tends to become sometimes a bit overcomplicated when it's called like the strategic conversations, right? You need to have strategic conversations with everybody, right? So which is what has been discussed quite a bit, right? And I think it's really more about many companies who don't have a value framework in place. They still had a sales process somewhere, right? There was maybe a solution consulting team involved. There was maybe a sales case that was created to actually get this deal done, right? So much work was done previously, and this information probably, and in many cases, doesn't find the way into like the post-sales services, customer success teams, right? So if you at least have that information to understand, okay, what was the intention? Why did you do this? Why did the budget holder accept this proposal, right? So what was the reason to actually saying yes? And how much do you understand who your stakeholder is, what they're trying to do, right? And I think that those are just very simple questions. Why are they doing this? Who are you, right? Are you my, call it user, power user, executive sponsor, whatever you want to call these roles? I just understand that. And I had a really good conversation with Dave Jackson around that at some point, where we also said that it's just so important to also look at these personas from a customer perspective. What is their intent while they're here, right? So how are they motivated, and how can you make them look good internally, right? So I think that's just so important. And somehow that usually gets lost. And then in customer success, you have many ask, okay, should we do a review meeting with the customer? And then it's still, and it's quite sad to see after so many years where this has been done, there's still then slide decks being prepared with product metrics, right? There's usage metrics in there, and there's all these different reports in there where many customers will then look at it and say, yeah, well, that's nice, right? It would be great. And sometimes it's great if the product would show that to us, right? If the usage is good, but what are we actually driving, right? So, and that's what you want to have. You want to have a shared accountability of what we're doing so that the customer can decide, are we with the partner actually doing a good job in achieving that? and then see where we're going. But that's really rarely the case.
I used to salivate. We had, at a former company I worked at, we had this mock QBR, that, QBR certification. I won't get into its value or anything else or how I feel about it. Right. But so we had this QBR certification, and I would go and I would play a role, and it was role playing. And as part of this deck, there was this, it looked like almost like a heat map, right? There was green, there was yellow, and there was red. It was, like a heat map or something like that. And I started salivating. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to ask questions about this. Because I knew that somebody included that because it was part of the deck that was built, but I knew they had no clue what those things meant. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go, what does green mean? What does red mean? What does yellow mean? And invariably they're like, well, it's, it was like usage data or something. And they started stammering because they couldn't speak to that slide. And my message was always like, listen, I don't know what this means. If you don't know what it means, don't put it on a slide if you can't speak to it, because you're going to lose credibility and trust, and you're better off not having it. So, so obviously, if you're going to speak to some kind of metrics, you need to be able to tell a story about how those results matter to them. And that comes with understanding what your products are purposely built to do and being well in tune with that, so you can be prescriptive and saying, like, here's what we can do with our products and services, and let me show you how to do it. And obviously the intersection of that should marry with, what are their goals, right? And sometimes you might have to convince them to say, like, all right, you have those goals. Are they actually good goals? Are they going to help you move the needle and maybe push them more towards something that they haven't thought of? And that's your job as an expert, right? In your product as a vendor, that's what your job is to do, is to push them to help them get results. And sometimes that might mean like, hey, I know you're trying to do this over here, but this will be a better opportunity for you to shine, for your company to do well, for you to actually get some results.
And I think especially tough times kind of teach you that, right? I think COVID for many was such a case, right, where companies where budgets were smaller in some areas, right, and where they were kind of forced to kind of really talk about, okay, what's the impact? Why are we doing this, right? Because beforehand budgets might have been more loose, and especially if you compare, for example, the German market with the US market, right? So people in the businesses itself, in the expert teams, usually had a much higher budget on like their company credit cards compared to German teams, right? So it could happen that you have a team, a specialist team, where they would just say, okay, I will just swipe my credit card and get, I don't know, a certain piece of software for a year, right? And just do that. Probably wouldn't happen in that similar size in Germany. But if you then have a crisis, this will get questioned, right? This will be questioned why you got that piece of software, and you need to able to elevate and elevate the discussion. And I think in many cases then, this is for some companies the first time they actually have to have these conversations where it's really about, okay, are we actually that important, right? Are we worth the money? Is our pricing actually fitting to that value that we're providing to the customers, right? So if they're looking at this like measurable impact they have, right, or these results they've driven, is that worth the revenue we're generating for the company, right? And the first time this conversation is happening, you might get to the point where you say, okay, maybe my pricing is a bit bold, right? So maybe we have to look at that as well. So I think there are just so many components that are part of that, right? So this whole value topic needs to be something where basically the whole executive team needs to be aligned on understanding what are we driving, how are we driving it, and how successfully are we driving it, to actually be able to tell if things are going good.
Yeah, I mean, look, in a bull market, everybody's a stock market genius, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's making money. It doesn't matter really what you invest in. Like, you can, recommend this stock, that stock, just the momentum of the stock market. In a bull market, people are going to make money. But when there's a bear market, so in other words, I started really seeing this in 2021 is when I think I really started seeing it. And the thing that sticks out for me, like when I was at Freshworks, I got there in 2019, we were a private company. In 2021, we went public. And this is like right on the precipice of where people started talking about, so people started scrutinizing their SaaS spend and looking at, all right, what are we actually using all these licenses for? Are we actually getting value? and you started seeing like all these high flying SaaS stocks that were just crushing it. When people started, pulling back, tightening the purse strings, so to speak, and started questioning their spend and their value, and we started seeing, a lot more churn. So you couldn't just put everything on autopilot. That's why when I looked at like 2019, like, yeah, my churn numbers are great. I'm like, oh, what did you actually do to retain that customer? Or
Yeah.
is this just a byproduct of like, hey, we're in a bull market, people are spending and everything is gravy and nobody's questioning it?
Yeah.
But 2021, you started seeing that change. And now, that pendulum has swung much further in the other direction, and people are really scrutinizing spend. They're really looking at the value that they're getting from the products, and the game has changed. And the customer success, I would say, or CSM role has certainly changed with that. Gone are the days of relationship manager and autopilot stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you got to be able to show your customers how they can get results and how they can get more or better results. And that has to be constant. It can't just be like a one-time thing. So yeah, the game has changed, and it's always been hard, I would say, to be a CSM. It's even harder now. And I think you really have to beef up your product knowledge and figure out how you can show customers how they can continuously get some results with your products. And that really
Yeah.
comes with knowing your products well and who buys them and why they buy them and all that stuff you talked about.
Yeah, and I think we had this conversation a few times, a few sessions earlier, where we also discussed that this discussion is much more complex than that, right? Yes, customer success is going through a lot of change, but SaaS is also going through a lot of change, right? And I think the strongest SaaS companies out there basically understand that and kind of put their heads together and figure out, okay, how can we solve that, right? Which are like the functions and which are the motions which actually support us at this point in time, right? And how can we make the best out of the personnel, the talent we have, and fix that, right? So, for example, I talked to a great chief customer officer just recently, who rose through the ranks in solution consulting, which reminded me also a bit about how we collaborated closely with solution consulting in the past, right? Where there was just so much value in understanding how they helped sales fix the deal, right? And how they basically set the success team up for success even before that, right? And I think there's so much truth in understanding that. And it's just SaaS, right? And the SaaS, how it happened, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, is not happening anymore, right? So you have to be much more stringent and much more focused on the value to actually make things happen. So this is why I love that we're focusing much more on this customer value topic nowadays, because I think especially we discussed these customer success like basic topics for, I don't know, maybe the last decade, right? And now it's time to actually put more value into it, make it measurable, and actually have a real evolution of the topic. And although it's quite drastically discussed now, the topic, I think it actually helps us get forward and help a lot more people get a seat at the table for customer success related topic. And no matter if they will be a CCO, CRO, or whatever that will be.
Well, I mean, it's definitely, I think, so you mentioned like solution, kind of solution architecture,
Engineering,
engineers, and
pre-sales. Yeah.
that seems to be the evolution of the CSM. Is there going to be more of those folks, which would be interesting, because obviously you'll have to be very, you talk about processes, you'll have to be process focused, roles, responsibilities focused in terms of their roles, because it can't be, if you're going to have like a solution architect or solution engineer, it can't be the catch-all thing. You can't just say, all right, you're going to be that, but oh, here's all this other crap that you're the catch-all for, with chasing billing stuff and renewals and all that. I mean, solution architects, solution engineers, they're not going to want to do that stuff.
No,
You know what I mean? So how do you focus that? Maybe it splits off into two, and you have more of the relationship type folks, account managers, and more solution engineer types. I think that's the sort of the line in the sand there, moving forward, and we'll see a breakout of those two roles. So similar to like what you see, I think, on like a pre-sales, post-sales, because it's all kind of the same thing. But what you see in pre-sales, we have a salesperson and a solution engineer. But yeah, would it be interesting? I would say to anybody, like, if you're not technical today, I would say get some
More
sort
technical.
of, yeah, get more technical, like really dig into your products and learn them as much as you can, and
Understand the
you
value,
know,
right?
yeah, and not to shill. Like and I just put out I posted on LinkedIn a recent video on a whole CSM knowledge management framework, and I highlighted, so I juxtapose, like, kind of process excellence and lay that over the framework, because they're basically, it's rooted in process, proven principles. But when it comes to like knowing your products, because if we say like, hey, you want to be more technical, what does that mean? Or hey, you need to know your products. Well, there should be a good definition in terms of what that
Yeah.
means and the level of knowledge you need within your role for that. So yeah, I thought about that and put that together, because that should be clearly laid out, and then there should be a plan on how you go about acquiring that knowledge. To simply say like you should know your products or be more technical, like that's too easy and that's too abstract. Like you have to be more
Depends on
specific
the
in terms
product
of what
as
that
well, right?
means.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the fundamental things apply. Like I mentioned a few of them. You should know the pricing. You should know why they buy or who buys. So you talk about, ICPs. You
Yeah.
should be able to tell like compelling stories about your products, and those should fit into some kind of like value model or value framework. You should be able to demo it through storytelling. You should be able to show them how to get results through, solution consulting, stuff like that. Like that should be well defined, and then that way we can upskill current CSMs or find CSMs that maybe have some of that skill set and hire those folks.
100%. And I think, talking a lot about this value topic, I think next time we'll probably have some exciting news for everybody out there, right? So for everybody out there, maybe as a bit of a teaser, there will be some news quite soon about what we're planning to do. So Jim and I are talking a lot about how to also advance what we're doing here as part of this show, but we're also discussing in-person events, meetups, community building, community creation. So we're wrapping our heads around this whole topic quite a bit. And I think, we're very excited to what we'll be announcing soon. So I'm not sure if we'll be ready next week, but very soonish. So everybody be excited. There will be a lot going on. So the Boston-Berlin connection will become even closer, and we will try to make the world even smaller. So anything we should share about that, Jim, already? Or should we keep them excited and exploding out of excitement?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have, maybe we can make some laser noises, some sound effects. I don't know how to add anything else to that. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to learning from you on that. I know you've done a great job, not only in locally in Berlin where you're from, but I would say in Western Europe in general. It seems like you've have a great community of customer success folks, and you've done a lot to foster that and put that together. And I know that's a lot of work. I'm going to look to you to learn. I talk a lot about strengths, and I don't know if you know about working genius or what have you. One of the geniuses is galvanizing people, like the ability to like really rally people behind an idea. And I think you're awesome at that. I'm not so awesome. So I'm going to try to learn from the master in terms of how you go about doing it, because it's not one of my strengths. So I'm going to lean on you a
Thank
lot.
you. Thank you so much, Jim. Thanks for that. I'm always just trying out things, and once in a while they turn out to be good. So, and with this show, for example, you're a big piece of that, right? I think without you, there would be much less soul and much less authentic humor in this. So, thank you for being part of this. And we will be announcing that exciting stuff very soonish. So, expect maybe a little bit of a rebranding, in-person events, more community building. So, we'll share that soon. Until then, we have an exciting guest for next week. We'll be announcing tomorrow. And the week after, probably Jim and I will do the announcement and use the show to have another chat and share these exciting news. So thanks again, Jim, for today. Have a good evening in Boston. And until then, I guess everybody check out the recording if you weren't able to join live, and see you next week. So have a good evening and goodbye.